The human mind is one of the most beautiful, powerful, and fragile things we possess. It carries our creativity, our memories, our faith, and sometimes our pain. But what if healing could begin, not just in the heart, but in the mind? Join us for the Beautiful Mind series, 6 nights of truth, tools, and hope for mental peace and wholeness. From May 4th to May 9th, every evening at 7 p.m. on Zoom. Discover biblical insights and practical skills to help you navigate grief, anxiety, depression, trauma, addiction, and loneliness. Because peace of mind is possible, and healing is within reach.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight brings us to the final presentation in our Beautiful Mind series, Remedies and Skills for Mental Peace and Wholeness. We have received important insights and practical coping skills night after night on this fascinating journey of discovery. Again, my name is Jimmy Ferguson. I am your privileged host and the pastor of the Sharon Temple Seventh Adventist Church. I want to thank you so much for being out night after night. It is your presence that has made this series the wonderful success it has been. On this, our final night, I invite you again to sit back, relax, and anticipate an enriching experience. Welcome to all.
On this final night of the Beautiful Mind series, Remedies and Skills for Mental Peace and Wholeness. Our presenter is Malcolm Bernard, is an experienced psychotherapist and the founder of Monday Courage, where he and his team guide individuals through life's varied challenges. Malcolm holds a master's degree in counseling psychology from Reformed Theological Seminary and a bachelor's degree in accounting from Oakwood University. His academic and professional training, including certifications as a public accountant and a Level 2 Gottman relational coach, equip him with a unique blend of analytical skills and empathetic counseling. Before his journey into psychotherapy, Malcolm developed his expertise as a financial analyst and controller, gaining insights into organizational dynamics and effective management practices. His workshops on leadership and personal development have influenced many within healthcare, finance, and beyond, helping to enhance both professional and personal growth. Malcolm is focused on exploring the integration of mental health and spiritual well-being, drawing on his broad experience in psychotherapy and seminary training. His approach is grounded in a commitment to authenticity and a belief in the transformative power of faith and understanding in addressing mental health challenges.
Me. Pleased to join you all and grateful for Pastor Ferguson to include me and invite me. I got to watch the replay of some of the previous nights from the series, and boy, y'all got me closing up after some heavyweights. So I can tell you all have been blessed and have gotten some great information. And I feel privileged to come in and share on the topic of loneliness. Before we get started, I'll say a prayer and then we'll get going together. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity to join these good folks, to be a part of their exploration into mental health and the role it plays in our lives and the vision that you have for us pursuing and improving our mental health. Thank you for the lives and the souls that are present here. Thank you for the ministry and the service they provide their community. And ask that you walk with us and bless us, that we can share some good information and learn. And I appreciate this opportunity to be here and ask that you touch our lives and bless us. In your son's name I pray, amen. So speaking on the subject of loneliness, and this is, for me, this is about both understanding, coping, and overcoming loneliness. Loneliness is essentially, it's an emotional experience where you're feeling disconnected or isolated, despite a desire for connection. Heard this great quote: loneliness is not the absence of people, but the absence of connection. And that is specifically what it's all about. It's a desire and the hunger for connection. We all have a need for social connection. We were all implanted with a desire for community, for family, for relationships. One of the first things God ever said about any human being was that it is not good for man to be alone. And even God, in the way that he presented, he didn't show up as a single, as a duo, but a trio. So even God went to the trouble to make it clear to us that he is showing up as a family. And just about as soon as man was created, he expanded and gave him a family. So it's clear that community, relationships, friendships, connection, intimacy, this is something that the need for it was built into us, hardwired from the absolute very beginning. If you want to imagine what loneliness is, and loneliness is different than some of the other great topics. I believe you all have talked about grief, depression, anxiety, I think addiction and trauma, if I'm getting them right. So depression and anxiety probably share the same space. Those are both mood disorders, and they represent maybe a breakdown in our functioning and our ability to cope with different moods and the way we react to stimuli in our environment and work, what have you. You're on your way to work, you're driving down the highway, someone starts honking their horn, or they cut around you in kind of a rude or aggressive way. That sets you up with an invitation to step into a certain type of mood. It might be anger, it might be frustration. So mood disorders are all about our ability to navigate, to recognize and regulate our own mood. Well, loneliness is different from that, because essentially it's a response to really to an unmet need that can either arise as a result of certain moods or certain levels of health, or it can produce it. So loneliness, and I'm a therapist, and therapists love analogies, so bear with me. But loneliness, in a lot of ways, is like it's like a hunger, and so you can imagine if you were hungry, you would essentially, that's your body telling you, hey, it's been a while since you've eaten. You need food, you need nourishment, you need calories in order to maintain and do the things that your body is designed to do. So loneliness is like a social hunger, and that's your body's response to essentially a need that hasn't been met. Now, that's good, and that's appropriate. And so there are many versions of loneliness that are healthy responses to that. And we should be thankful for those. For hunger, how would we know that we need to eat without that? And same with certain types of loneliness. How would we recognize, like, oh, I think I need some connection, I need to touch base, I need to connect with my people? where it becomes challenging and more difficult to navigate is when we move from that kind of basic social hunger, which I might call like circumstantial hunger or circumstantial loneliness. Um, we move from that to something else, which is not simply I'm hungry. Oh my goodness, I haven't eaten yet today, or I skipped a couple of meals. But now instead of simply hunger, it's what if you have a stomach flu or stomach bug? I'm sure everybody has had that at some point. And you know as well as I do just how much fun that is. And I'm sure you can't wait for your next opportunity to have a stomach bug. So imagine a stomach bug, and there's it's not simply that you haven't eaten or that you're not aware of the fact that you don't need to eat. It's just on top of that, you have this illness that comes baked in with all these symptoms, and one or some or all of them may interfere with your ability to be aware of your hunger or your even ability to eat. So if you have a stomach bug, your hunger is more complex there because it's not simply a matter of, okay, let me go feed myself. It's, well, I'm nauseous. I feel dizzy. My head is spinning. I don't even feel I can get out of bed. So now I'm not just navigating, an unmet need or a lack of awareness. This thing has even intercepted my desire, my ability to, excuse me, to feel the need. And that type of thing I might liken more to depression or anxiety. And that's what I might call like pathological loneliness. It's more than just like, hey, I haven't connected with folks in a while. It's I have an illness, some sort of impaired health that is, for whatever reason, blocking my ability to get that need met. And that's a lot more complex. So um, moving into that, if you find yourself experiencing that, and that's the thing of depression, using that as an example. Depression is like almost like an alien entity. I love sci-fi movies. So if you imagine depression, it can arise because of a number of things, one of which might be that you haven't had the need for connection met, and even your ability or your perception of your ability to get that need met might be impaired. And so among that and other things, it might lead to you developing some depression, which once it gets going, depression often leaves you feeling, among various symptoms, a desire to isolate, a desire to distance yourself from other people, even close friendships, close relationships, for any number of reasons. Some of which include you're worried that there'll be judgment, or you're worried that people may not understand, or you're looking at yourself and thinking, I just feel like such a weight and such a downer. And so I would really rather protect and spare these people from having to deal with all the mess that I'm dealing with right now. So I'm going to pull back, or it could just be my energy level is so low that feels sapped. I don't feel like I can interact with people. And so when you're pulling back from that, those social connections and from getting those needs met, that can further add to the depression. That's why I say it's like an alien entity, because it almost wants to defend itself. It almost wants to protect itself, and so challenging that and pushing through that can be complex, not impossible, for certain. Healing and recovery for everything you all have heard about each of these nights, including what I'm talking about, is most certainly possible. We're just acknowledging the challenge of it. So loneliness in that sense can be something that is leading to, so it has a causality where it's leading to depression or anxiety or something like that, as well as you can find it as also showing up as like the results of those same things. So it's kind of like a merry-go-round round. You can hop on at any point. You can hop on and find loneliness as triggering or leading to a mental illness or impaired mental health. Or you can catch the merry-go-round further in the spin and hop on where it's more so like a symptom or a result of it, or even something that's exacerbating it. So that sort of pathological loneliness is where it gets more complex, more challenging. Again, not impossible to heal from. People are recovering from this all the time, thank God. But that's just the nature of the challenge that you can find yourself dealing with there. So, um, pardon me, y'all. I've been counseling all day, and you're talking for hours and hours. So, thank you all for that patience. So, in these types of loneliness, you have circumstantial loneliness, which tends to come up based on your circumstances. You have moved to a new city for a job opportunity, and you're in a new community. You're away from home, or your previous home, and you're trying to get the lay of the land. You might have moved to Delaware and be visiting this lovely Sharon Temple Church, and you may be first time visitor and haven't met anyone yet. And so you might feel some circumstantial loneliness, which I'm imagining would not last very long in this church, because I'm sure you get very warmly welcomed and patched in pretty quickly. But for that kind of brief time in the in between that comes in the midst of a life transition or change, you can be feeling some loneliness. And it's a loneliness that has arisen out of these circumstances. You've moved, or you have graduated college, or you have gone to college, or you might be a new parent. And while we're thinking like, oh, I wouldn't expect a new parent to be lonely. Well, yeah, they have family, they have social social networks and support systems, but the baby requires a lot. And we all get taught very quickly to have a deep respect and reverence for the baby's sleep schedule. So getting out and socializing, you're a little bit hesitant to that. My wife and I were very, very careful not to tamper with our kids' sleep schedule, because woe be unto us if we did. So you can find yourself feeling isolated. I know my wife and I both felt that at some point, because it's just harder to get out and manage the same routines. So there's a variety of circumstances that can contribute to that, what I would label as circumstantial loneliness. And we'll talk through some of the ways that we can deal with and kind of cope with both of these things. In 2018, on Valentine's Day, the British Broadcasting Corporation, in partnership with the University of Manchester, launched what they called the BBC Loneliness Experiment. And what they did was they distributed this survey, or made it available. And they got responses from 55,000 people in over 230 countries around the world. And so even to this day, this is the biggest research study on loneliness in the history of the world. And there were some findings that emerged that came out of that. One of them, 1 in 3 adults age 16 and older, and that's who the survey was for. It was for anybody, any human being age 16 and older, 1 in 3 adults reported feeling lonely. And so we're talking, 33%. You meet 3 people, one of them is going to say, "Hey, I'm experiencing loneliness for sure enough that it merits me sharing that with you." And then the other 2 will say, "Hey, not as much for me." What is fascinating though, because they're asking you, do you feel highly lonely? Do you feel somewhat? Or you feel like, man, I'm never lonely? What is fascinating, and I think it says a lot about how we, potential stigma and to what extent we give ourselves permission to acknowledge the loneliness, let alone even sharing it and communicating with somebody else. What is really interesting is when they use certain words or language to ascertain if you were lonely, but they didn't use the word loneliness. So they took the word loneliness out of some questions, except they asked still, these are questions to determine your loneliness. They found that 30% of the people shifted their reports from never lonely to sometimes lonely. And I think for me, what is fascinating about that is there is an influence and an impact on some people's ability to acknowledge loneliness when you use the word loneliness. They may be feeling like, well, there's something I don't like about that word, or there's something that's kind of weak or vulnerable, or like, I'm not an 8-year-old kid, I'm not lonely. So you take the word out, and then all of a sudden, the same feelings emerge, and they are sharing. Well, like, well, now that you mention it, I do at times find myself without social interaction and then desiring it. Well, that would be loneliness. So I think it's just powerful how we feel about the way we feel about things. There's the way we feel, and then there's the way we feel about the way we feel. So the other key findings out of this research, a BBC loneliness experiment, the 2 age groups, reporting the highest degrees of loneliness were the 16 to 24 age group. They, as well as the other group would be the 65 plus group. And the 16 to 24 age group reported among the, one of the 2 highest groups for experiencing loneliness. Well, they reported experiencing certain things where they felt that loneliness. So these are the contexts in which they felt their loneliness. Major life transitions, such as moving away from family. So you got 16 to 24, and then you have this age range exactly halfway in between, and that's 18 to 22. And what so very commonly happens to us in the years 18 to 22? We leave home. Either we're going to college, we're enrolling in the military, something, but we leave home. We're leaving our family, our support system, everything that's familiar, and we're venturing out into the world. Well, one of the highest groups of human beings that is reporting loneliness are people going through that life transition. So it says a lot about what it's like when you head off to college. And conversely, what's interesting is after college, and I find this in my work, as I talk to people at different stages of life, and I get a lot of people who are in their middle and older 20s, all the way up to like 30s, 40s, telling me how hard it is to find friends, make friends, keep friends. And I may ask, like, hey, was it always like that? Like, do you remember that being the case in like your adolescence or your childhood? Like, no. I had tons of friends in high school. And then I went off to college, and some may say, oh, well, I did struggle there. It became difficult. And then some may say, no, actually, it was a rough start in college, but I did start to make friends, start to meet people. But then I graduated and I moved into an apartment and I got a job. And I'm like, oh, did you notice any change then? Well, yes. I noticed that from my mid 20s and moving deeper in. And so here's the theory, is it that when you are in school, in high school, in college, obviously there's groups that are going to deal with that. So you're going to have your fluctuations in those reporting loneliness. And then, hopefully in college, you find your group, you find your people, and you get into the flow of it after a while. But then you leave, and the time in your life when you live in this little contained community, it's almost like a town of nothing but 18 to 22-year-olds who are living in very close proximity. And then you leave that, excuse me, and you step into this world where you're commuting to work in a car, you're in an apartment, potentially by yourself, and now you're in the work world. Does it become a lot more difficult to make friends because you're not as closely surrounded by people, and as well as your time is more occupied on work and other things? And that's before we even talk about 30s and 40s where you're starting your family. So the other age group is the 65 plus age group. And one of the transitions they report as part of giving context to their loneliness is retirement, leaving the workforce, losing work-based relationships that once provided a sense of purpose. Work-based relationships can be very powerful because it's not like we're just sitting around hanging out all day. We're working together towards a common purpose, a common goal. We're functioning within teams, and there's something about hustling next to somebody, sweating next to somebody, like working on something. It's why there's often some really, really deep connections that get formed when a person, say, like joins the military. I'll hear veterans talk about, like, man, lifelong friends, or went in there and people I would have never thought I would talk to, people from all over the country. Like, I'm from Oakland, California. This guy's from middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. But when you threw us in there and we're hustling and we're getting screamed at together and we're marching and we're running and exhausted together, there started to become this bond and this brotherhood. So even I'd say within a professional context of work, if you are laboring alongside somebody, you can build some pretty significant relationships, which is a great sneak preview to what some of the things that we have at our disposal to do to combat and cope with loneliness. We'll put a pin on that idea of laboring and working alongside somebody and how that contributes to building a relationship. So additionally, in this research study, and this is just to show the interplay between mental health, particularly some mood disorders, and loneliness. For the adults who reported experiencing loneliness, 81% of them also reported experiencing anxiety or depression. 81%. So if you sit down with 100 of them and they're all seated and you're like, hey, stand up for anybody who has anxiety or depression, 81 out of that 100 would stand up and say, yep, anxiety and or depression. 75% of them, adults who reported experiencing loneliness, also reported a lack of meaning and purpose, and essentially like a feeling of emptiness, and which is another maybe risk factor to the post-retirement transition. It's hard not to intertwine your identity and your work. I started off pretty early saying I'm a therapist. Well, there's a lot more to my identity than that. I wasn't born a therapist. I don't have any genetic structure for being a therapist. Um, but that has woven pretty deeply into my identity. So if I was not working, if I wasn't able to do that job, or if I got to the point where all these gray hairs are getting the best of me, and I was ready to retire, now what's my identity then? I'm not working as a therapist anymore. Who am I? And so that can be a part of the loneliness. There's the collaboration, us working together with colleagues, and then there's the sense of post-retirement, like, okay, those relationships have changed or ended, and I'm trying to get a sense of who I am and what my meaning and purpose is now. And finally, 73% of those who reported experience loneliness said technology is contributing to it. Social media making connections feel shallow, um, and um, some of the last ones. I'll keep us moving. 66% report. Um, okay, so these are, run it back. These particular stats um, are essentially their response, the people that reported experiencing loneliness, their response to the question, what do they identify as the major contributors of loneliness? So with that context in mind, 73% say technology and social media. 66% report a lack of family time or family spending less time together. 62% say they work too much, leaving little room for building relationships. 60% say mental health challenges like the depression, anxiety we shared before. So um, this intertwine, and you can hear it on that last point, this intertwining between loneliness and mental health um, certainly shows up. There's that combination of causality and resulting symptoms where loneliness can lead to depression, can lead to anxiety, as well as depression can lead to loneliness. Anxiety can lead to loneliness, and they can even feed each other. So mental health for sure is a big part of it. And when there is that intertwining is where there are a bit more unique the challenges of combating it. But in terms of combating it, well, the circumstantial loneliness, which I would call the preferable of the two, maybe a bit of the easier to deal with, but still tough. That is essentially, that's going to work the way your body's hunger system does. Your body becomes aware of a need that hasn't been met. It signals your brain to let you know. That's it crying out for help, like, hey, give me a little help here. And then it becomes about, how do I get this need met? And the only thing that makes that particularly challenging is where the options for social connections may be limited. If you live in a place where just for whatever reason you're not finding many options or community to build, or if your work or you're so busy, and depending on the nature of your work and the types of relationships available there, if it becomes a challenge in that point, and that certainly can be the case. But what I would say is the biggest challenge for a person encountering that circumstantial social hunger or loneliness is not merely the supply of connections or sources of connection available, but what they think about the fact that they are experiencing loneliness. If it's If it's merely, hey, I'm feeling lonely and I think I need to get some connection, that's one thing. If it moves into what's the matter with me or what's wrong with me or some sort of like shame or embarrassment or even some self-contempt or hostility, then that can become even more powerful than the actual loneliness itself. Now, so combating that is, I think, looking back to some of those comments that were shared in, from the findings and contributors, reaching out. This is especially for the circumstantial loneliness, reaching out to friends and family, taking the time to, call, email, connect. It's okay to need people. We were built that way. And it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of God's intentional design. Remember, the first comment he ever made about any human being was, it is not good for man to be alone. Another way to combat the circumstantial loneliness is join a community group, or volunteer, to build social connections. The volunteer one is really heavily underrated. And that points back to what I was saying before about laboring or working alongside people. If you volunteer for some sort of event and you go and you work around some people and you can see what you think about these people, because you may land in this organization, see other volunteers, and you don't know them, or maybe you know them very little, but you see them. Ask yourself what you think of them starting out. Now go spend an hour or a couple of hours working alongside them, doing teamwork with them, depending on them, asking them for help, helping them. Now, at the end of it, now look at them and see, what do you think of those same people? I would bet decent money that you feel more close to them, you feel more connected. So here's another one that that you good folks might especially like, and that is getting involved in church activities for fellowship and support. And I think that's one of the things that makes church so powerful and makes the need for it so powerful, potentially powerful. And that is just the ability to have that community, to find that sense of connection. Church is an amazing opportunity for that. It's also an amazing opportunity to test your fears about connection, to test your fears about community. Because if you get in community with other human beings, eventually you're going to be hurt. So the question is, can you forgive? Can you forgive yourself? And can you work through that to maintain the community? Now, dealing with the, and I'm aware of the time, so let me make sure I'm moving along. The dealing with the pathological loneliness, and that's where we're starting to intertwine some of the mental health issues. Okay, so using, say, depression as an example, there's really the frustrating reality, and I've experienced depression, and so I can speak about this professionally, but also I know what it feels like, and I know that really annoying, frustrating reality of it requires some work. I remember thinking, and I've seen it in others, I remember feeling a hope that there would just be some lightning that would strike and zap my depression and make it go away. And but there is some work involved. And there's layers and degrees of depression, and some are so severe that they require some pretty significant interventions. But there are many degrees of depression that can be addressed through a number of things. And I like everything and the kitchen sink approach to dealing with depression. So there is the the thing you don't want to do, doing it, connecting, reaching out to people, getting in touch. You may not feel like it. You may feel afraid of, like, are they tired of me? Is this too much? Hey, that's okay. Let them tell you they're too tired of you. You don't need to go closing your own door. Reach out. You need it. And you're not going to want to do it, but it's a part of the step to get the help, to get that connection. There is um, feeding yourself, and feeding yourself foods and nutrition that really add to energy, add to health. I'm thinking specifically, there's certain foods that have, I think it's a protein or peptide. It's called tyrosine. So tyrosine, tyrosine. Your brain, so your body consumes that and releases the foods that contain it, tyrosine. And I think an example of foods that have it is, like, I think avocado, almonds, sweet potato, I think fish, typically the healthier foods. Well, your brain takes tyrosine and converts that into dopamine. So your body can actually generate its own medication to treat depression, as well as anxiety and ADHD, to be honest. Um, and so nutrition plays a big part. There's also physical activity, exercise. You don't have to go enter an Ironman competition or an Iron Woman competition. It can simply just be taking a walk. And so that gets your body generating some good positive hormones and neurotransmitters that can combat some of the mental issues, and can make again, prompt your brain to start making its own medication. And then there is literally medication, which, I think we're doing better at embracing that. But I know for a lot of people, there's still a lot of fears and concerns about it. The depression or anxiety or any of those things that represent maybe a deficiency of a certain type of neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitter is a fancy name for hormone. Humans are hormonal, not just women, like popular opinion. Men are hormonal, women are hormonal, kids are hormonal. We are all hormonal, and we're supposed to be, because without hormones, we couldn't eat, sleep, grow, do a lot of stuff. And so depression functions in a fairly, like, from a hormone perspective, it's not a ton different than, say, like diabetes. Diabetes is, you have this hormone called insulin, and it's not functioning effectively. And so as a result, you have some impairment in the process of taking sugar out of your bloodstream and moving it to energy production or fat storage, whatever. Well, you take something like, say, ADHD or dopamine. I know ADHD in particular, it's a deficiency of dopamine in the brain. That's basically a hormone. And so what the hormone does is, hormones pass messages, just like neurotransmitters. The neuro, brain, transmitter, they're passing messages in the brain. So when you have healthy brain that is kind of functioning at an equilibrium, then you have, for example, dopamine that gets deployed, and it's sitting there taking and passing messages, kind of like diplomats in an embassy passing messages between countries. Where we run into issues is where the dopamine is getting pulled back too quickly. Just like if you hear, hey, Russia has closed down their embassy in the United States and recalled their diplomats. That's probably not a good sign. We want that communication happening. Same thing with the dopamine. If your brain is reabsorbing it too quickly, then you can have an impairment of health, the communication in your brain activity. And so it doesn't mean you're crazy. It's just, again, pretty similar to diabetes. The hormone is just not being able to function the way it's supposed to, the way it is ideal. So the medication will stop that from happening or delay it. A common one for depression, they're called SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. That's a mouthful, right? It's a fancy way of saying, hey, to make sure that ambassador hormone doesn't get recalled too quickly, doesn't get reuptaked too quickly, then I'm going to deploy this selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. I'm going to inhibit the reuptake process or recalling that ambassador, make him stay out there longer. Hey, buddy, keep the communication going. We're not trying to pull you out too quickly. You stay out, hang out longer, more communication, more health. That's a lot of what your types of medications, whether it be depression, anxiety, ADC, that's a lot of what they're doing. Is just making the hormones, the communicator, those communicators continue to pass messages for a longer case. So medication, it's okay. People have different experiences with it, and it's not perfect, and I get it. It's also not the only thing. We also want, in addition to nutrition, exercise, we want spiritual connection. There's connection to your community, there's your family, there's hobbies. So your faith, your spirituality, for sure is a part of it. There's a great scripture related to this, Hebrews 10:24-25. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. So there are for sure examples of just the importance of the role of relationships and community. I'm thinking of the role that Barnabas played in essentially bringing Paul into the community. The church at that time, understandably, was pretty suspicious of Paul. You went from trying to kill us yesterday, and now you want to be buddy today. Like, what's up? Well, it was really Barnabas that played that role of bridging and bringing him in and using the trust and relationship that was already for him as a way of extending that and getting Paul into the mix. So sometimes that's a bit of what we need, is to look for and pray for our own Barnabas to help get us into a community. So I want to be respectful of you all's time. I think I've covered most things here. I think just I want to close by really emphasizing that these things, loneliness, whether it's contributing to or coming out of some mental health issues, they can feel scary and can feel tempting to want to take it, hide with it, isolate ourselves with it. I would just throw out to anybody who is tempted to do that, whose game plan is that? You start struggling, you're experiencing this, and you say, I need to go off on my own. I need to figure this out. I need to handle this. I need to shield everybody. Well, that sounds really similar to a game plan that maybe Adam caught when they sinned and they fell down, and he thought, okay, let's hide from God. Let's take this off to the side. Let's isolate. I think we can figure this out on our own. So I would just pause a person to say, isolating, pulling back, disconnecting from those that love and care about you. Whose game plan is that? And is that really meant to be? The challenge of it isn't just the actual loneliness, depression, for example. It's sometimes it's our reaction to it. It's our response to it. It's what we believe about it or believe about ourselves. But people all over the world deal with these things. I think we're becoming more aware of it and more graceful to ourselves and others in dealing with it. I can tell you, I experienced depression. I live with ADHD. I take medication for both. And that's not all I do, but that's a part of what I do. I've got to go get myself out to work out. I let my trainer torture me for a bit. I have to be intentional about staying connected to family and friends. I have to be thoughtful about the type of food I'm eating. Sleep is a challenge for me, but I am not giving up that struggle. But I have to be careful about sleep because all these things in combination can go towards really improving health and allowing us to live life. And so none of these are or need to be death sentences. They're challenges, but they can also be a blessing in the sense that experiencing loneliness, experiencing the things that kind of like we struggle with, can be like a road sign to divert our attention and say, hey, your attention's needed here, some work here. It's kind of like an oil change light in your car. You don't need to beat yourself up when the oil change light goes off. It's just your car's way of saying, hey, some attention is needed here. So I thank you all, appreciate this time. And I know we maybe got a question, so I'll let you all handle that and I'm ready.
Yeah. First of all, Doc Bernard, thank you so much. Every team needs a home run hitter.
Mhm.
So I want you to know you came in at the right
Oh,
time,
man, I
and you
appreciate it.
have brought this series to conclusion in a remarkable way. Thank you so much for your transparency and vulnerability and openness in your sharing. We did have one question from the Zoom user.
Mhm.
Zoom user, thank you so much for being here. I don't think you've missed a single night, maybe one. Uh,
Mhm.
as we move toward the conclusion, you will get information as to how you can access each of these presentations. So we're going to post that information for you. If you miss it, take a note of the God Cares email that will come up, and you can send a message there and say, hey, I would like to have the link that I needed, whatever connection I'll need to have access to all of the presentations that have been presented this week, and we'll ensure that you get that. Doctor, you talked about this interesting phenomenon that you can actually be in society with people and still be lonely. What
Mhm.
you don't have to be lonely. What is that phenomenon?
Sure. I think that's the challenge of um, there's the quantity and the quality of social connections.
Mhm.
So you can be surrounded by people and feeling lonely. You can be in a marriage and feeling lonely. You can be in a big family with lots of siblings and feeling lonely. So it's not just the number of connections available, there's also the quality of the relationships. And yeah, that brings in more complexity, but I would say there's still tremendous potential to work on that. Where I would probably start someone is honestly maybe leaning into the loneliness by turning inward and working on the relationship with yourself.
Mm.
I would call that like relationship prime. Like so that's the prototype that many other relationships are based on. If you struggle with like say people pleasing and your people pleasing is so exhausting to you that it makes you want to pull back from people because I can't fall into the trap of people pleasing if I'm not around people, right?
Mhm.
So then the relationship with yourself piece comes in. What are you telling yourself in the context of your own relationship with yourself that leads you to people please? Is it perchance a situation where you're kind of whispering to yourself, the only value and bring the only value and worth you bring is when you're helping people. The only thing that makes you useful or the only way people will want to be around you is if you're doing something for them.
Mhm.
And imagine saying that to a child or a loved one. Imagine looking over at your spouse and saying, unless you're doing something for people, there's really no point in having you around.
Mm.
but we sometimes implicitly whisper these messages to ourselves. So that's where those things can kind of expose. It doesn't need to be an invitation for shame and guilt, but just an opportunity like, hey, what what kind of reset do I need to maybe have in the relationship with myself?
Okay. One of our listeners chimed in and said, wow, this presentation this evening really resonates with me. I can identify with this. Thank you so much for the presentation. I am a part of that, not me personally. I am a part of that. What I'm getting at, I am a part of that 65 and older community. I don't
Mm,
get out very much. Pretty much extended family and friends are not there. I don't have a companion or grandchildren. How does that person, uh, what are some tips or a tip that can help that person with loneliness?
okay. Um, and I think especially, and I didn't mention it, but in the backdrop of all this is that, over the past years, we've all survived a pandemic, which has really reset and changed the dynamics around all kinds of social circles. But if you are in a situation like that where you're post 65 and plus, and you may not have those folks around, depending on your level of health and mobility, I know those are factors too. I would say there's your family of birth or family of marriage, but there's also your family of choice. And so don't underestimate the opportunity to build connections and build family. Um, it means a little bit of vulnerability and a little bit of putting yourself out there, maybe volunteering, maybe going to like an after school program, reading with children. Like you may need to present yourself and make yourself known, but don't be surprised if in doing that you start getting the opportunity to interact with people. And even for someone who may say have like mobility challenges, if they can get a computer, camera, some kind of setup, you that can be a great source. I know we mentioned that social media connections can make a challenge, and maybe it depends on how you use them. Social media can maybe get in the way of connection, or maybe it can used properly, deployed properly, maybe can help it because you could be sitting next to the couch on somebody and feel like you're 1,000 miles away from them. So, yeah.
Before we're done, let me be sure. Zoom user, did you have a question beyond access to the presentation? We don't want to assume, at least I don't want to assume
Mhm.
that that may have been the reason you raised your hands. Did you have another question beyond access to the presentations?
Mhm.
Okay, not hearing anything. Zoom user, I'm hoping that that did satisfy your question. All right, we could go on, man. This has been extremely rich, and I know perhaps there are those who would like to just have the opportunity to just go on and to ask questions and to hear responses. But we have come to the conclusion of our time together. So thank you so much, and I hope that we're able to take these principles and these suggestions, no matter what category of life we find ourselves in. Doc talked about um, the fact that the critical ages of loneliness is between 16 and 22. I believe I remember that correctly, and then 65 and older. So
Mhm.
no matter where we may be, let's think about perhaps making ourselves vulnerable as we were just counseled to make sure that we reach out to people, we make the connections. Don't feel bad if you don't have immediate family around. We are wonderfully blessed as a church community to be able to make those kinds of connections and to extend family
Mhm.
ties. So I hope that we will take advantage of that.